Geek Out! Hey, this is a special interview with Ryan O'Sullivan and Plaid Klaus about their upcoming graphic novel, Void Trip, collecting the entire Image Comics miniseries out everywhere on Wednesday, May 30th. Let's let them talk about it and just check out the book. And coming back on the show, we have Ryan O'Sullivan and Plaid Klaus. They're here to talk about their Image Comics miniseries, Void Trip. You get the entire miniseries in one solid concentrated dose on Wednesday, May 30th, in comic book stores everywhere, and on Comixology, and in bookstores the following Tuesday, June 5th. Gentlemen, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us, man.
Appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
So the last time you guys were on, you were talking about how this book was really a series about trying to be free in a universe that kind of automatically, like almost like an organism, constantly course corrects and tries to like discourage that level of freedom that kind of imposes a sense of normalcy. It's a book that it's a lot, even though it's a sci-fi book, and Klaus, you knock the kind of like retro, like 1950s sci-fi look like right out of the park. It's a lot more metaphysical than I thought it would be. Like there's a journey. They certainly go from point A to point B, but it's a lot more metaphysical and psychological than I thought. Was that something that had surprised you both when you were going about it, or is it something that just kind of was there in the DNA from jump?
I mean, it's something we'd always planned, that we wanted it to be metaphysical. We wanted to do a story that people pick up thinking, oh, it seems like a stoner comedy book, but then as they read, it sort of pulled the rug out from under their feet. And the risk we had was not making it read like a stoner comedy book, because it's talking about a lot of things, like the nature of existence, the nature of suffering, meaning of life almost. And it's very easy to veer into like cheesy, corny stuff you say, or one would say when they were high and 14 years old. So we were trying to make it a mature story at the same time. In terms of metaphysical, I think, we've got a lot of like Gnostic influences in the story, and especially in the art, I think, in terms of pulling from the ether, because we were talking about the nature of existence and humanity, and I think the idea of Void Trip is trying to find the main character isn't happy, and it's trying to find an understanding of why. And I think when you look at the metaphysical, you tend to look at the perfect. So she has these metaphysical ideas, and she touches the metaphysical on occasion, and she touches perfection, but then the mundane nature of reality sort of brings her back down, and the contrast between both. The drama of the story is chiefly from, for me anyway, death of the author. Could be anything.
No, and then so one of the things I tried to do with it, because we did want to elevate it, it's a book essentially about seeking. She's seeking meaning, and part of what I wanted to do was to have the reader go on that journey with them. So I tried to develop this sort of symbol structures that were embedded in the book, that would sort of carry throughout, so that the reader would constantly be like trying to figure it out and piece things together. One of the big things was the covers themselves. I wanted them to sort of stand out and carry a message that encompasses the whole story, but also stood out from what's on the shelf. Like by centering the logo and actually making it really tiny. A lot of logos in comics, they kind of like are just yelling at you. They're just trying to be so loud. So by reducing it down and making this a small thing in the center, it brings the reader's eyes right to it. And so I use that as a tool. Using the circle, which can represent infinity, amongst other things, and then as a star in the center, like that represents the soul of man. And in the second issue, that circle turns from a white star to the other side of the coin, a black void, a literal black void, which is right in the center, of the Great White's chest, where his heart should be. So it's all these like little symbols we're starting to drop in. And, in the first issue, the first thing they have in the first spread is the stars looming right over them, the sun, and then they actually sail off into the sun, which is a little bit of foreshadowing for the rest of the series. And then when the Void comes in issue 2, his entrance, the hole in his chest, that circle frames a panel it alludes to the fact that the whole world is kind of inside of him in a way. So my job, I felt, was to sort of build all these little metaphors and visual clues to make the reader constantly try to search for meaning as Anna's trying to search for meaning. And then to tie it, the hardest part was letting those symbols evolve and then tie them up at the end alongside the narrative itself. So I think putting all those in there kind of helps people, search for a bigger meaning to the story.
That's deep as hell. I mean, this is a story where you've got, without going into the circumstances of quite how it goes down, you've literally got Anna and Gabe riding off into the sunset, and you've got, at the same, there's instances where this book will break your heart, but you've also got the big you've got characters taking like a pie to the face. Like there's a undercurrent of black comedy to everything. Was that to kind of make it more tenable than have it just kind of be this very existential sci-fi odyssey?
It's a mixture of two things, man. Like our last book that we did together called Turncoat had a similar sort of dark feel to it. And I think we sort of, as you work together as a creative team, you sort of develop a collaborative voice. And for whatever reason, that seems to be the way the two of us are aligned. Because we've got very similar senses of humour, similar interests. And I think that the sort of the dark humour, it makes the palatable stuff more, the sort of preachy stuff a bit more palatable. At the same time, the sort of the preachy stuff makes the humour feel less juvenile by comparison. So they complement each other well. And it was a definite decision.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Is that
for sure? Because I mean, who wants to sit and read? I guess there's a place for it, but like if you're just reading these dark, dreary narratives, I mean, I think it turned in the '80s, with Frank Miller, and then after that, they had Watchmen, and comics became this just super dark, heady space, and it's sort of been running on that for a while. And one thing that I miss from comics, and I grew up on Calvin and Hobbes, I like that lighthearted stuff. I like both sides to it, and I don't know. I guess Ryan just naturally writes that way, and my art style just kind of works naturally with it, in accordance with it. So it's definitely a fun combination to create in.
With the idea, you had mentioned Great White earlier, this force of nature character that both lends a sense of urgency and inevitability to the entire narrative. What was it like, kind of, I guess if you've got characters that are trying to find nirvana, you've kind of got to have this more elemental figure trying to stop them at the same time. Perhaps the universe the universe's course correction personified. But how did you kind of come about creating both Great White and just kind of on your end, Klaus, kind of rendering this like all white, faceless, like maniac figure?
Yeah, well, it actually works really well as an art director as well. So we kind of sculpted it together. He wanted sort of this bounty hunter look and feel. But then when we talked more about the character, that's where we knew we wanted it to have a mask. And I went through a couple different versions until like the visor just worked so well. It's sort of this wider lens. There's nothing human about it. There's like you could do two little eyes or something. There's nothing human about a visor. It's a single viewpoint for the eyes. And then a lot of the other characteristics were sort of just to cue that the reader should think it's a bounty hunter initially. We want them thinking that he's trying to kill them. And we want to be able to set that up for later when we flip it. But beyond that, part of concept art is just finding the right silhouettes, the right shapes and parts to a character. That stuff's kind of hard to simplify in a few words, but it just takes time.
I mean, he's perhaps the most visually striking character in the entire comic. Just because he's kind of got that, like, there will be blood, like, you can't stop me kind of feel to him.
Well, and there's, like, little things I put on, too. So he's got 3 scars on each arm, so it's sort of like, I wanted people to read into it, like, is that 666 sort of thing. But then he also has these like alien-eyed logos on his shoulder plates. It's sort of a metaphor because he's so alien to the world of any of the humans themselves. So there's all these like little nods, and again, it goes back to like wanting the reader to just keep questioning what he is, who he is, what's underneath the mask.
Because we never actually say, do we?
No,
not directly in the book.
Yeah, there are certainly hints. We were talking to Kyle Starks a couple weeks ago, who has another kind of like hobos on a journey story with Rock Candy Mountain, and the entire narrative there is they're trying to get to the titular location, and his reasoning was if the characters are trying to get to heaven, the chief antagonist has to be the devil. So was that kind of like the same kind of idea with creating like Great White from a creative standpoint?
Well, is he the devil? Is he God? Depends on your view of how, or is he neither? It depends on your view of how that whole thing works. Because one argument that could be made is that God likes to have dominion over mankind, but if mankind becomes free, then God doesn't. So in a way, perhaps to maintain his position of power over humanity, God has to limit them. Because otherwise something God's created could outdo him and therefore be more powerful than him. So therefore the ending, without spoiling it, would be Anna or whoever transcending above the God. But we don't know that. But at the same time, it could be the devil trying to, no, within this playground you shouldn't escape me and escape to God. So it depends. But then again, it could be a third person that no one's ever guessed. But
yeah, I mean,
I don't say too much, man.
Yeah, we talked a lot about like implanting some Gnostic stuff in there. And a big part of Gnosticism obviously is the idea that mankind is actually trapped in the realm by a lowercase god, like a lower G god, and that the higher god is actually like our souls, and we're just divided into these shards by the Gnostic demiurge is the idea. So again, it goes back to that's for the star symbolism. The sun, he's essentially if he's a demiurge character, he's trapping their souls in this realm. Hence, they're what they're actually longing to escape from is this realm itself. But I mean, that's just one take on it, because actually we wove different interpretations and tried to make sure that they all worked.
There is this idea of like samsara, though. They are trying to like break the cycle. They are trying to reach nirvana.
Right. And a big thing in Gnosticism, some people say in the occult, is that the idea is the moon is illusion and the sun is realization, but the sun is also a trap. So like when you see the light at the end of life, and people say go into the light, that's you actually get reincarnated because of going into the light. So the idea of samsara is escaping, that would be to not go into the light, but would actually be escape into, which ironically would be more like the void of nothingness. It's nothing to do with physical matter. So yeah, I mean, I kept drawing from these same set of symbols, but they really work.
Jake, I feel like this is the most metaphysical, mind-blowing...
I've been trying to like come up with something to say, but I can't. I was just like, Great White is metal looking. That's the best I can come up with. Just such a great design.
It is metal as hell.
Oh, yeah.
No, you were listening...
This is why we needed the sort of the dark humor as well, because we wanted people to be like, okay, well, this isn't just two people, I don't know, sort of spouting off about Gnosticism or the nature of existence, or how Ligotti-esque suffering. Life is suffering, so throw yourself off a bridge. This is, there's some humour to this too, and it's ultimately a story about a character. As highfalutin as we are in terms of the big picture, this is about Anna's journey, and she's a sort of self-inclusive. I don't know, fully realised character in and of herself. She's a person too, not just a chosen one.
Right, like more than just an idea, fully fleshed out. Though, Jake had invoked metal, but if I remember correctly, Klaus, you were listening to a lot of 70s psychedelic rock while drawing this?
Yeah, early on, just to kind of get the vibes of that era, because, it's the transition from Beat Generation through the 60s to the 70s. And I would kind of make playlists according to what characters were on, too. So, like, some of the harder psychedelic stuff that you get in the early 70s I would use that more for the demiurge, and then some of the lighthearted stuff I'd put on if it was like a trip scene or whatever, but just a working technique.
Sure. And then if I remember, you were also kind of leaning more towards hip-hop by the end, or looking to get into hip-hop?
Oh, I don't know. I'm always trying to find new music. Honestly, genres don't matter to me so much as like like if a music moves you in a certain way, like it kind of cuts past all those other containers, and like it hits right into your emotions. Like, I mean, a lot of people hate him, and I don't like everything he does, but someone like Kanye with his concept albums, I think Yeezus, like he hits on notes in some of those songs that are more than just what he's singing about, and it creates this really like atmospheric, crazy vibe within the song. You know, someone like David Lynch does this a lot too, where there's a narrative running, but the thing that's hitting your subconscious and making you feel a way is speaking on a different level than what you're actually watching. It's like trying to tap into something animal inside your brain. So yeah, I was going through a lot of hip hop, and actually there's a lot of artists that do that really well, not just Kanye, but yeah.
I've been big on the Vince Staples lately. He's been pretty cool.
All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah, check out Big Fish Theory. That album is what If Bitches Brew is what Miles Davis did to jazz, what the other thing Big Fish Theory does to hip hop. It's pretty incredible.
Cool.
So one of the things, Ryan, you had mentioned that in the original pitch there was a planet of Ents that used people for paper. What were some things that you kind of regretted cutting, and what are some of the things that you just absolutely love across these 5 issues where you're just like, oh, this is like the best thing like in our entire series?
The things I love the most.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sad about the Ents. I think they've almost appeared in another story I tried to do, but it didn't happen. I think I'm just going to have to give up on them, sadly. What was the bits I really liked? The fruit people, I think. Just because they're so dumb. Like, it's the story tries to take itself seriously, but then the fruit people show up, and it's just like, no. It's just a really, really dumb concept. The idea that our protagonists get high by eating fruit, and then the fruit comes alive and they still eat it. And they're happy to be eaten. It's just weird. That's something that always makes me laugh. But I think I don't know. You asked me to pick my favourite child now. I like Great White, the antagonist. I feel like he sort of took on a life of his own and became bigger than the story he was in, especially towards the end. I'm almost tempted to tell another story with him, but it's done. We're finished with Void Trip's finished. But yeah, I mean, when I look back at Void Trip, the bits I like the most tend to be his scenes for whatever reason.
Yeah, mine are the real emotional moments, like when the beats really matter, when it's like the crux of the story. That's when I tend to sort of really plan them out and try to think of a creative way to do it within comics. So there's a scene that you guys might remember where Anna meets AI. It's sort of one of Gabe's bon voyage moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to plan that farewell page off right. So I turned into a moment-to-moment shot, which we don't do a lot in the book. So it stood out in that way. It's a perfect 9-panel grid. And then on top of that, the fact that she's sort of trying to hold on to this hologram, this shining thing, and then it's sort of scraped away and it becomes just this metal object. And like in that moment, it's just the two characters with a white background, so it's really focusing in on the intensity of the emotions. And then when the realization is that without spoiling, the emotional beat changes, and so then the background kicks back in, and she's sort of alone in this room with this metal object. So to me, that because it works so well in comics to have those moment-to-moment beats, and it stands out. That's sort of my favorite moment, and hopefully the emotions carry over to the reader. That's the most important part to me.
Yeah, I think all of issue 4, man, was really especially
Ryan gave me the script at issue 4, and I was just like, this is perfect. With the silent opening and everything, it was a fun one to work on.
This is perfect. You took your words off the page. Cheers, mate.
Yeah.
I do like that. I mean, you guys really, at the risk of getting my nose brown, the ending of every issue was always kind of a bit of a gut punch. You knew right where to end each bit of the story, which is kind of a tricky thing, figuring out how much of a hook, how much of a conclusion and how much of a hook are going to leave.
Yeah, I
the
mean,
reader.
especially in 20 pages. Like Ryan's a master of craft when it comes to that. I don't know how he does it. Sorry, finish it.
It's good, man. There's literally no way I can respond to that. But yeah, cheers.
So, as you guys may recall, something we ask everybody that comes on our program, and I think, let's see, last time Klaus was still listening to the 70s psychedelic rock, and Klaus had the 70s psychedelic rock, and Ryan had XCOM 2. But what are you guys currently geeking out over?
You go first, because I got to think for a second.
Okay, I'm currently reading a lot more. So I'm reading a lot of the modernists. Just finished James Joyce's Ulysses. Just started Virginia Woolf's Miss Dalloway. So it's stream of consciousness writing that I'm all about right now. But I promise to never ever make a stream of consciousness comic because that would just irritate everyone. But yeah, that's what I'm geeking out over right now.
Okay, well, I just discovered Jim James. I mean, I'd heard Morning Jacket. I didn't realize he had a solo album, and I just listened to his Eternally Even, I think it was. And that I was on that for like a couple weeks, like working straight. It was pretty good vibes. As far as like what I'm reading, man, I hate to say it, like I've been so busy, I haven't been reading a lot of stuff. But I'd recommend anyone to check out. I don't know if I dropped this last time. Limbo. It's always one of the comics I recommend people, and the second one's Day Tripper. I think those are like cool out of the box comics. Most of the stuff I read is just technical art books. Like I just finished a 400-page book on perspective.
Wow.
Nice.
So
I mean, it kind of like, and all the people that we've kind of interviewed for the show, I don't know if anybody's kind of gone into visual theory or broken down visual theory as much in an interview as as you, Klaus. So which is like, it adds a whole new dimension to it because, we read so many comics on this for this show. It's like, oh, okay. But then you're like, yeah, this is why this logo looks like this, and this is why this.
Yeah, it's like now I got to go back and
I'm holding
read
back
all of it
too. Like
again.
I don't want to waste too much time on it. But that's, to me, like, I think as an artist, you have to do, because the story's there, you have to kind of enter into it and really live it and make it come off the page and come alive, so that the reader can feel what the writer was making you feel when you read the script. But then on top of that, I feel like part of your job is to sort of like add a visual story on top of it to like, if you took the words away, there should still be these like visual metaphors. And I might have mentioned on the show last time, but like the Black Monolith in 2001, sort of like the perfect representation of the 21st century. And that whole thing is about like, we came from cavemen, we were sort of drawn by this transcendental object into the future, and then it projects over to Saturn, which has some occult connotations, and that's like where does our future lie? Is like the main thing. Like, what's the next embryo stage? Is it AI? But I think so. My job as an artist is to sort of make those visual representations that like reinforce what the story's doing. So
right on.
Yeah.
And Ryan, you had mentioned kind of modernist and stream of consciousness writing. I just have to ask: Have you ever read Kerouac, like On the Road?
Yeah.
That's a bit of
Kerouac was an influence for Void Trip massively.
Yeah, that and Fear and Loathing, I feel like are certainly two big ones.
Yeah, I think that if I had to pick two books, it would be Fear and Loathing and Moby Dick. They're the two we pull from for this the most.
Is that why
Moby Dick informing the Great White? The idea, but as it says in one of the issues, in Void Trip, the Great White is chasing the heroes, just sort of turned on its head a bit.
And so he bore all his rage upon that great white hump.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Any chance I get to? I think that's the only chance I'll
ever
ever
get.
get.
Didn't make a single hump joke. It's right there as well. Oh, well.
I mean, all the more reason to do a spin-off on Great White.
Oh yeah.
Because he really is, like you were mentioning, he kind of transcends the narrative. He really, like, there is something striking both from a writer and artist standpoint about that character, because he's just so much more than he, like, compared to everything else on the page.
It seems almost vain to say it, but he is, isn't he? Like, it's almost like he's like a guest in our story, and then he just goes off to do his own thing. Like, there's some huge other story with him going on that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, man, that's the fun thing about creating. No. I mean, that's the fun thing about creating. I feel like these things come alive on their own in some weird way, and you're just kind of help midwifing them or something.
because we plotted this like really solidly down to the page. Like before we started the first script, everything was plotted out. So I don't know how he sort of became sentient.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he started in your brain, obviously.
Don't we all?
As a concept.
Wow.
Anyway,
but is there anything, before we let you guys, back loose? Is there anything else you guys want to plug?
Not. What can I talk about? What can't I talk about? Yeah, Dark Souls issue 1 from me in May. The Void Trip trade is out in May as well. That's all I can talk about right now. What my friends got coming out? Paradiso, that trade's coming out in May. Angelic, that trade's coming out in May.
Yeah,
May's a big month actually.
It is. Yeah, we're supposed to get Ram and Dev back on the show sometime soon.
So we had when we did the single issues coming out for Void Trip, we put a preview of Paradiso in the back of issue 1.
Yep.
And they did the same for us. So it's been like the four of us, me, Klaus, Ram, and Dev, all doing this little sci-fi journey together. And the stories couldn't be more different.
I got to hang out with Ram again over in Seattle a couple months ago. It was good seeing him again.
It's a cool guy, man.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Well, and then I guess Klaus.
Sorry, I hope my baby's not. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
Yeah,
well, making his funny noises.
I have to say,
podcast debut.
Yeah, since the last time you've been on, you're a dad now. So congrats on becoming a father, man.
Thanks. 5 months. It's been crazy.
Yeah. How much sleep do you get?
He sleeps through the night. I'm lucky.
Oh,
but
okay.
Yeah, but he won't sleep or start to unless I bop him on a ball. So I'm constantly. It's like my part-time job right now is ball bouncing. If anyone needs a ball bouncer, that's what I can do that.
Right on. Well, again, Void Trip out in comic book stores and Comixology everywhere on Wednesday, May 30th, and out in bookstores, available for pre-order on Amazon on Tuesday, June 5th. Ryan, Klaus, thanks again for coming on the show, guys.
Thanks, man. It was fun. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us, man.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday, and you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.